So the research that we do in my laboratory is really important because fundamentally a lot of what we're doing is looking at how humans are impacting the carbon cycle, often in terrestrial environments, be it climate change in the Arctic, addressing permafrost thaw, land use change in the tropics, and really looking at how those impacts are mobilizing carbon into aquatic ecosystems and what the fate of that carbon will be. We've seen a lot of research in recent years seeing increased relevance of these aquatic ecosystems as hotspots for greenhouse gas emissions, and so that's really what we're trying to get at, is how important are they and how we can basically project from these impacts going forward. So when we see increased permafrost thaw in the Arctic, what does that mean for downstream receiving aquatic ecosystems? When we see land use degradation predominantly driven by agriculture in the tropics, again, what does that mean for downstream headwater streams through to large rivers and ultimately out into the coastal ocean? The real-world applications of the research we're really doing in my laboratory is, in my opinion, we're conducting this unique experiment on the planet as it stands. We're never going to do this again. We're never going to see climate change like this. We're also never going to see anthropogenic human-derived perturbation like this in terms of agricultural impacts in the tropics. And so what we're trying to do is give you the fundamental data to project going forward. If we go and deforest the Amazon in the coming years, what does that mean for the carbon cycle? What does that mean for climate then ultimately? And so what does it mean for all of us on the planet? In terms of how our research has been different from what past scientists have done is, well, in a couple of ways. One, we spend a lot of time in the Arctic focused on these very small periods in terms of time, like the spring thaw, which are incredibly important in terms of export of carbon between land and ocean. And it's a very difficult time to work in the region. You can imagine house-sized blocks of ice tumbling down major rivers. It's challenging to work there. And we spent a lot of time really figuring out how to work safely there and really improve flux estimates at those times. And similarly in tropical ecosystems, we're one of the first groups to start working in places like in the Congo in Central Africa. And to me, it's kind of what we did in the Mississippi 150 years ago and the Amazon 50 years ago, we're doing in the Congo today. And so that's really the front of environmental impacts in my mind, and it's a really important place to be working, but it's an incredibly challenging place to work. And it's one of the things I think I'm personally the most proudest of, that we're sort of pushing science in that region and hopefully helping other research groups to go and work there, as well as engendering local scientists to start publishing and producing data that's of relevance to all of us. I tell this to my students, you work incredibly hard, you generate lots of data, often do a lot of field work, a lot of long days, long nights even doing laboratory work, and then you get these beautiful data sets, but nobody knows it exists until it's published. And ultimately what it is it's giving you your voice at the scientific table. And I made this pitch in my talk today that a paper was very helpful for me early on in my career. Your papers, as you publish them, are hopefully going to be very helpful for other scientists. And so really it's a way we can help each other. But that help isn't there until that data is published. And so I encourage people to get those data sets out. It can be challenging working through them, but ultimately it also gets easier with time. And a big part of publication is really keep the message simple. And if you build the paper around a simple message to begin with, you can then add other things later. But first, start with a simple skeleton, get that message across, and that usually helps as well, I found, with the review process, because the reviewers can then easily follow it. And so that would be my advice on how to publish. So I've been very fortunate, and my research group works all over the planet, from the Arctic to the equator, right? We work everywhere, and I thoroughly enjoy travel, and so if you're going to do that kind of work, you have to really enjoy travel and new cultures and engaging with new cultures. I feel exceptionally grateful to work in the host of countries that we do, and to work alongside local scientists. And I've personally learned a lot from working with particularly indigenous communities in the Arctic, from both Alaska and Siberia. And I wouldn't have the perspective of how the Pan-Arctic is changing, I think, today if I hadn't engaged with those communities. And similarly with the work we do in the tropics, I've learned a lot from local landholders in terms of not just the pace of change happening in countries like in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but also kind of what it means for, say, soil erosion, what that means for stream water quality, and ultimately what's being exported right out to the ocean. And so engaging with those local communities and local scientists is incredibly important. In terms of the challenges, there's always challenges in working in any remote environment, whether it's in Alaska, whether it's in Siberia, whether it's in Congo, and I'm planning on saving those for an extensive book when I retire.